Whenever we want to talk about the NFL Draft, the NFL teams, we go to Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports. He joins us, all guests, right now on the Boardwalk Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Eric, how you doing this Saturday?
I'm all right, man. Pleasure's mine to be on. What's going on with you?
Not too much. You know, one of the topics that came up this week, when this topic came up, I immediately thought of you because, you know, the NFL Draft, you looked at a lot of the guys who came out of the draft. We've talked on here about the wide receivers before. We had a question this week. Which of the top 5 receivers picked is going to have the biggest impact in 2020? Not who's going to have the best career, but who could have the biggest impact. And those are two different things. So I ask you, which rookie wide receiver of the top 5 guys who were picked could have the biggest impact in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting this year, especially. Like last year, for instance, you know, we saw second and third rounders outperform some of the first round wide receivers, and it wouldn't stun me to see that again. I mean, A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin, and, you know, there were a lot of first-year guys who were really impressive that were taken, you know, after the 50th pick. Of those top 5 guys, I'm fascinated to see. I feel like Henry Ruggs is going to be sort of pigeonholed into a little bit of a part-time big play role. So I don't necessarily think he's going to be that, 65 catch, 1,000 yard, 10 TD kind of guy. As explosive as he is, I don't know that he's that year one guy. I could see Jerry Jeudy being very impactful for Denver, but I don't necessarily think with all the weapons they have that he's necessarily going to be in that kind of number 1 or number 2 role right away as well. But, I look at now Brandon Ayuk, who has an opportunity in San Francisco with Deebo Samuel's injury. If Deebo was great as a rookie, there may be a real good shot there. Michael Pittman, who went high in round 2, I think has a great chance to be a go-to receiver. Maybe not the clear-cut number 1 with T.Y. Hilton can come back, but I wouldn't be stunned if Pittman ends up being a huge impact, because I still think, like CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, there's other options, that there's parts to their game that they may, need to develop a little bit more. Their roles may be kind of slimmed down or reduced. But with Pittman in Indy, I just have a feeling he's going to come in and do some fairly big things right away.
I'm glad you mentioned Dallas, because I know a lot of people were looking at seeing like, oh, what a great job by the Cowboys. I mean, but here's the thing. The Cowboys still have their 2 top target guys from last year. Both Amari Cooper and Gallup both had over 100 targets last year. So realistically, how much can CeeDee Lamb do in an offense that has not 1, not 2, but 3, if you include Ezekiel Elliott, weapons in the offense? Maybe it's a little bit hyperbole to sit there and act like this guy is going to have this huge impact.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be fascinated to see what Mike McCarthy does with that offense. Obviously, when they had the 3 receiver sets really cooking up there in Green Bay, it was hard to defend. I just felt like, not only did you have to have a fantastic nickel corner and reliable safeties, but, you also had to watch for the run game as a changeup. You had to watch, occasionally they'd bring a fullback in too, and you didn't know how to defend that. They had tight ends occasionally who could make some noise. So I think the same thing applies in Dallas, although I don't know that there's a tight end you're too terribly worried about. But with Zeke in the backfield, the 2 other receivers you mentioned, and now Lamb, I still think there's a healthy role for him. And he'll be involved as a punt returner too, I suspect. I think that's something he did part-time at Oklahoma, was very good at. Occasionally would give you the -6 yard, but he would also break off some big ones too. And kind of like with Gallup, where, at first you didn't see a whole lot out of him, and then he kind of looked like he was shot out of a cannon. I could see CeeDee Lamb having that kind of effect, even with the 2 guys you mentioned, and likely a number 3 type of role.
Now, the guys who were drafted ahead of him, Jeudy and Ruggs, I find both of their situations interesting, because you have a guy in Jeudy who's going to an offense that was pretty pathetic last year in Denver. So they obviously need him, and we don't know how good the offensive line is going to be. We don't know, how good Drew Lock can be in year 2. And then Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, John Gruden falls in and out of love with quarterbacks all the time, so we don't know what the heck's going to happen with the Raiders. Obviously, Ruggs has a specific role that they need in the offense, but realistically, the offense couldn't even score 20 points per game last year. So what can we really expect from Ruggs and Jeudy in year 1?
Yeah, I mean, with Ruggs, And here's the thing, too. Like, if Brian Edwards, the receiver they took in round 3, if he's healthy, he was one of my favorite receivers to watch last year. I think he's got a role in that offense. Even with Tyrell Williams there and, obviously even with Hunter Renfrow in the slot, they've got some good tight end talent with Darren Waller. They bring in, Jason Witten's kind of a mentor or whatever, but Foster Moreau. They've got some depth there. Josh Jacobs can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think ideally they'd love to spread it around. So that's always going to limit the appeal of what, Ruggs can do right away. And I think that's a good thing, too, because he was so productive. I think he had 96 catches and 24 touchdowns in college. So they didn't use him a lot, but his impact was felt almost every single game. And even the games where Ruggs caught, 2 passes for 29 yards, he was still drawing safeties and letting those other guys like Devontae Smith and Jeudy get their run as well, Jalen Waddle, et cetera. So Ruggs is going to have an impact on that team one way or the other, even if it doesn't reflect in the stats, and I think Brian Edwards will too. But with Jeudy in Denver, there's at least the opportunity for a clear-cut role. Cortland Sutton is still their kind of de facto number 1. He played like it down the stretch. He had some big moments. I think there's a level of trust with Drew Lock after the 5 starts. So, Noah Fant is a good player. I don't know that he'll ever be a 7-catch-per-game kind of guy, whereas Jeudy, I think, of those top 2 or 3 guys, I think he's the one that has the chance to break out immediately because he is refined. He is so quick and dangerous in short space, and he can also be used as an over-the-top guy. So, you won't be attracting a lot of double coverage there. I really feel like Judy's going to have a chance to be pretty darn good right away, even if, we're only talking about, a 55 or 60 catch type of season. He could still really make a lot of hay from that.
You mentioned how refined Jeudy is. Is there going to be potentially, because there is no OTAs, there's been no rookie mini camps.
Yeah.
You got these guys going right in the training camp, basically. Is it even more important heading into these rookie years that the receivers that have the most NFL-ready skill sets are going to be in the position to be the most successful?
Yeah, excellent point. I think that has to be factored in. I should go back and look at the rookie effect of 2011. What I do remember was the quarterbacks like Andy Dalton, Cam Newton, and, some of the other first-year guys who were able to step in and do well right away. But for the wide receiver position, even with recent years where we've seen some rookies kind of break out, it typically still is a second year or a third year position where you see the biggest leap in their games. That's really where they should be at their prime or starting to reach their prime. So, yeah, I think when you look at these receivers, there are going to be some raw, talented players who have very quiet rookie years because of this coronavirus effect and the fact that we haven't had a full offseason. But for others who played in big games, who have played in offenses with NFL concepts, who have, proven themselves to be studious and understanding high football IQs and all that, somebody like Jeudy comes to mind, and you say to yourself, he should be as well equipped as almost any first-year wide receiver in this group to do fairly well.
Eric Edholm joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Now, obviously in our area here, Jalen Reagor's been a big topic ever since he got drafted. And it seems like Eagle fans are slowly been warming up to him more and more. And I think what's interesting is that, Doug Peterson mentioned that, how you do have Reagor as a big role in the offense. A lot of people who cover the team keep saying that they actually expect Reagor to be on the field the majority of the snaps and that he could have a huge role in the offense and maybe even get a high number of targets. What do you think Jalen Reagor can actually do for the Eagles?
He's such an explosive playmaker, and we saw it way more in 2018 than we did in 2019. It was so frustrating to watch those games last year because, they're breaking in a freshman quarterback. The offensive design, I think, fairly was called into question. And it really took them about 5 or 6 games before they started figuring out, Jalen Reagor's too good to not get the ball more than 3-4 times a game, right? It was a very slow start to the season. He'd get open. They wouldn't find him the ball. Finally, they moved him into the backfield. They used him as a wildcat guy. They used him on end arounds. They used him on bubble screens. They started getting the ball in his hands just knowing that he could make things happen. So I wouldn't be shocked to see something of a similar role, but watching his tape, even though he had a tendency to kind of round off his routes at times, he still needs a little work on the precision of his routes, I think. Even with that, the lower body explosion, the strength that he has for such a small guy, relatively speaking, a small guy. Of course, his dad was an Eagle, a defensive lineman. It's crazy to think about that lineage a little bit, but yeah, I really think he's got that ability to come in and make big plays. Does he drop some balls? Sure. Does he have some concentration issues and those things that have to be cleaned up? Yes. He doesn't come in a perfect prospect. That's why they were able to get him a little bit later in the first round. So that said, that versatility, that kind of Steve Smith, DJ Moore-like aggression in that small package, I really like the player. I was pretty high on him even with the limited production last year.
It's interesting also because you look at the guys who are already in Philadelphia, like Deshaun Jackson. People overlook the fact that, when D-Jax was in Tampa, guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin pointed to him for a lot of their success and development. How much could a veteran like D-Jax in the same room with Jalen Reagor, talking to him, helping him with things? We know Rager's been working out with Wentz in Texas. How much of those little things could also accelerate his ability to have an impact?
Oh, no doubt about it. It's so funny because early in his career, Deshaun Jackson had this reputation of being kind of a hothead, and he would sort of throw these little mini tantrums and stuff. But I've heard the same kind of things too. Other people have said, he's a really smart football player. He helps guys get better. He's a good teammate. So some of that reputation is unwarranted, and I think it's going to go a long way. And just the fact that Jalen Reagor has been around football his entire life with his dad, being a Super Bowl champion, coming back from a major injury. He got to see the back half of his career, as he turned 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And, I talked to Monte and he said, I never pushed him to football. He said, but the first time I saw him play a high school football game, I said to myself, this guy is going to be a pro. And, there's something to be said for that. Some guys just have that knack. So I think having a mentor like that, having a creative offensive play caller like Doug, having some pretty good offensive skill position talent around him elsewhere, not expecting him to come in and do everything perfectly right away. It's a pretty good spot for him to be in right now, I think.
Now, I had mentioned this week that I think there's a possibility that Justin Jefferson, the guy who was drafted after Reagor, has a great first year. Maybe not a better career than Reagor, but a better first year because he's going into an offense that has a huge void at wide receiver. Stephon Diggs, their number one guy in targets, arguably their best receiver, he's gone. He got traded. So Jefferson, who comes from that pro-style, high-powered offense at LSU, he's probably going to be given a large opportunity, and that offense is not an offense that needs to go deep every time. So, how much of an impact could Jefferson have in year one?
Yeah, and Kirk Cousins is one of those guys who is very accurate 10, 12 yards in. It's downfield where he's had trouble. And when LSU moved Jefferson from the outside predominantly, not, he still occasionally would line up outside, but when they pretty much moved him into the slot last year and they had Jamar Chase on the other side, and they had the tight ends and all these other players, it was the perfect home for him. And to have that kind of offense where he could, run slants, run two-way goes, some of those option routes. He was great on those slot fades. That was such a super route for him. You put that with Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook, assuming his contract situation's figured out. They've got a pretty meaty passing game. I wouldn't say it's, top 7 or 8 in the league or anything like that, but pretty good. And I think that maturity and that experience of seeing a high volume of targets, understanding what's expected of him. His offensive coordinator is now calling plays for the Carolina Panthers. There's a clear amount of respect for, what they did scheme-wise last year. It's a really good spot for him. I think the Vikings killed the draft. I don't usually love those huge draft classes with, they had 15 picks. I think it's the most the team has ever had in a year in the modern era. So that was shocking. But I think of those guys they drafted, he's certainly one that is going to be ready right away when he steps in.
Now, another thing that came out this week, obviously with the Eagles, Brandon Brooks, torn Achilles, out for the year. There's a lot of talk that the Eagles are going to stay in-house, and that would mean Matt Pryor playing right guard. What was your perspective on Matt Pryor coming out of college, and do you think that he can hold up for a full 16-game schedule playing the guard position.
Yeah, I didn't take a long look at him, to be totally honest. He wasn't a prospect that was getting a ton of buzz, and I think there was, some question: is he a right tackle? Is he a swing tackle? What exactly is he? There's always that concern taking a tremendous power guy like Brooks and out of the lineup and putting in a different type of player with less experience in that spot. Yeah, that's a drop off. But if they feel good enough about his flexibility, maybe it changes a little bit of the kind of the zone running scheme or what they do with that. It might require them to do a few little different things and make some tweaks to what they do with some of their power offense. But, it says a lot that they feel pretty good about him at this point. Could there be a move outside the organization? Sure, absolutely. I mean, things change all the time. One injury can mess everything up or somebody else getting hurt after this point could really kind of throw a wrench in their plans. But, it's not too similar to other teams that have taken that same approach at you see the Patriots not wanting to bring in Cam Newton to this point or anybody else to quarterback. Kind of says a lot about Jarrett Stidham in my mind. So I think anytime you see a team not rush to go out and sign the first available free agent just to plug a hole, tells you that they're pretty confident that what they have in-house is going to suffice.
Now, you mentioned guys like Cam Newton. I'm glad you brought him up because I did want to ask you this real quick before we let you go. I feel like half the reason why Cam Newton isn't on a team right now is because of the pandemic. You weren't be able to do medicals for all those months. You can't bring a guy in to work out right now. I feel like if there wasn't a pandemic going on, that Cam Newton would definitely be on a roster right now. Am I wrong?
Yeah, definitely, unless somebody found something, on a medical evaluation with that foot. I mean, I suspect the foot right now is the bigger immediate concern. I mean, there's some people who still wonder, how is his shoulder? There was some funky throwing mechanics that I really think affected his play. The couple of games he played last year, obviously, but then before that in 2018, which was it? Which issue is more pressing? So that's what NFL teams probably have to figure out. And there have been teams that have checked in with him. And I think once, conditions change, there may be a visit, there may be opportunities, or he may have to take the route of waiting for a quarterback to go down in the preseason and go that way. Look, obviously nobody was expecting Teddy Bridgewater to get hurt that year, and the Eagles got involved with the trade, obviously with Sam Bradford. And those kind of situations can happen out of the blue. That may be his best route, but I tend to agree with you. I think had this been a typical off season, he would have had more calls, more opportunities, more visits, and ultimately a team to sign with.
Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm, Yahoo Sports, NFL Draft. Great insights from him, and as all guests, he appeared today on the Boardwalk Hotline. Thanks again for the time, Eric. Great stuff.
You got it, man. Thank you.